I caused an accident and totaled the car. My boss, who took my luxury car for a drive without permission and wrecked it. Shocked, I hurriedly informed my boss, Dorothy. Wait, I don't own a car. What? Following this, my boss realized a terrible misunderstanding. My name is Angela, and I'm 38 years old. I recently switched jobs and joined a new company. The new company pays better, though there's a lot to learn. I was determined to give it my all. The person who became my boss at the new company I joined was a woman. Her name is Dorothy. She was a very well-dressed person, and I thought she looked like a model. Working with someone like her was exciting. However, that feeling turned to despair when I discovered her true nature. Dorothy was incredibly unreasonable and envious. She harshly reprimanded subordinates for mistakes and was prone to gossip and bad-mouthing others. We, her subordinates, tried our best not to become her targets. Our department essentially supports the entire company, so we're always busy. Dorothy, however, didn't seem to think so. She treated all her subordinates as if they were idle, dumping work on them. Angela, haven't you finished the task I assigned you? Sorry, I believe I can complete it by today. I told you to finish it quickly, didn't I? Complete it today. This is why I dislike people who grew up in wealthy families. Dorothy was in a bad mood from the morning, snapping at every little thing. Moreover, she seemed to have singled me out, frequently complaining to me. It started when she learned that I came from a wealthy family. I have a husband who earns well, and she could tell from my clothing. From day one, she instructed me to change my dress style, and I quickly developed an aversion to her. Therefore, I focused on learning my job and becoming independent to avoid drawing her attention. But even then, she would periodically vent her frustrations on me. I don't know if you're new or what, but you need to learn your job quickly. Do you even have the motivation? I'm sorry. Sorry doesn't cut it. I've entrusted you with important work, so just do as I say. Dorothy glared at me harshly and stormed back to her office with a huff. Though I wished she would handle important tasks herself, saying so would only make her angrier, so we subordinates could only apologize. Just as I was thinking it had been a disaster from the morning, Dorothy came from her office towards me again. She had a face like a devil. What's the meaning of this? Yes, what's wrong? Don't play dumb. You haven't finished managing the supplies yet. I plan to do that after completing the task you assigned me and scheduled it for tomorrow. I even entered it in the schedule. Don't make excuses. Your work pace is so slow. That's why it's never done on time. Do you understand that? Dorothy's eyes narrowed as she yelled, waiting for this moment. I shrank under her verbal assault. I had prioritized her tasks, thinking supply management wasn't urgent, but she wouldn't accept that explanation. Dorothy seemed only interested in yelling, not noticing that I was repeating myself. Feeling helpless, I couldn't respond and just repeated the same reason when she pressed for an explanation. Dorothy seemed only interested in yelling, not noticing that I was repeating myself. It seems like there's a lot of anger here. What happened? Oh, Susan. Well, this subordinate is having trouble learning her tasks. Just yelling won't help her learn. Why don't you explain the steps clearly and have her take notes? I felt rescued by her voice. She was Susan, the superior of my boss. Her name was also Susan, and although she looked demure, she was a very reliable woman. My colleagues and I admired her. She was the only one who could stop Dorothy's tyranny. Okay, Susan. I have a bit of free time right now. If you're too busy, shall I teach her? Oh, no. It's not something that should trouble Susan. Really? But you seemed so angry. It must be very important, right? Dorothy cornered by these remarks, appeared uncomfortable. She made up some excuse, took the documents Susan had brought, and quickly retreated to her office. Watching Dorothy's reaction, Susan chuckled mischievously. She didn't need to get so angry. I wonder if something's bothering her. It seemed the department head knew I was being scolded for not managing the supplies. I thanked Susan for her help and turned my attention back to the task I was assigned. I secretly wished Susan, not Dorothy, was my boss, so I wouldn't have to shrink away every day. But I kept these thoughts to myself. That afternoon I was summoned to Dorothy's office. Wondering what it was about and fearing another unreasonable scolding, I reluctantly headed to her office. Upon entering, I found Dorothy sitting arrogantly behind her desk. Finally, you're here. Even a fool like you can't keep time, it seems. I grimaced immediately upon hearing her sarcastic comment. Not missing my expression, Dorothy remarked that my face made the room gloomy. As my face stiffened at her words, she suddenly said, "Since you're struggling to learn your job, I've decided to personally mentor you." What? I was shocked, and my eyes widened. Then Dorothy demanded that I should be more pleased, saying something unreasonable. "Be more grateful. If you accept my guidance well, you might even get promoted." "Yes, thank you." "Well, by then I'll have been promoted even higher." Dorothy laughed, imagining her own promotion while I felt like sighing. If I get promoted and she advances further, it would be even more challenging. I don't have a strong desire for promotion. I'd rather have a peaceful time without dealing with Dorothy. But now that it's come to this, I can't escape. So consult me before doing anything. I reluctantly agreed to her instruction. The next day I found myself being manipulated by Dorothy yet again. The first task she assigned me was managing her schedule. Though I thought she should do it herself, since I'm not a secretary, I complied quietly, knowing refusal would lead to her yelling at me. The next task I was assigned was a job that Dorothy should have been doing. Primarily, it involved handling personnel documents and gathering materials for an upcoming event at the company. I already had other tasks, leading to increased overtime hours. While working, I consulted Dorothy on everything as she originally instructed. It was her work after all, and I wanted to give her due respect. However, Dorothy grew increasingly irritated and soon started yelling as soon as I entered her office. "Don't come to me for every little thing. Think and act for yourself." "But this is your work, Dorothy, and I didn't think it was right for me to decide on my own." "Excuses, excuses. Just get on with it. I only want to see results. I asked you to do these tedious tasks so I wouldn't have to. And if you keep asking for my opinion, it defeats the purpose." "Oh, okay, I understand." I felt anger towards Dorothy for yelling at me. I couldn't understand why I had to work overtime for her credit. When I discussed this with my husband, he agreed it was unreasonable. But every time I tried to confront her about it, she would just scream, leaving me unable to do anything. As time went on, thinking I would do anything she asked, Dorothy made an outrageous request. "I'm having a home party with some friends, and you're going to prepare it. You must be used to event management, right?" That's a bit. Just go shopping within the budget. Can't you follow my instructions?" Dorothy glared at me, starting to berate me as useless. It seemed she would continue until I agreed. Holding back a sigh, I agreed to do the shopping. Then Dorothy's tone instantly changed, and she handed me a shopping list with a pleasant voice. "Please pay for it yourself. I'll reimburse you for the total amount later." "Understood. Pay for it first. I'll reimburse you later. I want it done by tomorrow. You're off, right? I'll decide a meeting place for you to deliver the stuff." My precious day off was ruined by Dorothy's errand, leaving me disheartened. Returning to my desk and looking at the shopping list, I sighed when suddenly a voice came from above. Oh, are you organizing a home party? Uh, oh, hello, Susan. Good evening. Good evening, Angela. You've been working late a lot lately. Are you that busy? Must be tough. Actually, I've been assigned various tasks by Dorothy recently, and the workload is quite substantial, so I end up staying late. If only I could work faster, it wouldn't be like this. We talked for a while. It seemed Susan approached me because she noticed I looked tired and wanted to chat. I ended up venting frustrations that I usually keep to myself, even mentioning the home party shopping Dorothy had tasked me with. Then, after pondering for a bit, Susan said, I've got an idea. She turned to face me. If it's okay with you, I can help out. I happen to have the day off, but only if you're comfortable with it. But I can't ask you to do something like that. But your husband isn't off that day, right? It would be tough to buy all that by yourself. That made me want to talk more with Susan, so I decided to take her up on her offer. On our day off, Susan and I completed the shopping together and headed to the agreed meeting spot. Despite the hectic shopping spree, Susan remained energetic and patient with me. When we arrived, Dorothy, who had slipped out of work, was waiting with a frustrated look and arms crossed. I hurriedly approached her with the items. You're late. It's been 5 minutes past our meeting time. I'm sorry. And what's with that luxury car? Do you own such a car? No, it's just that. Did you come in a luxury car just to show off? Well, just give me that. Enough. Go back to the office. Dorothy snatched the bags from me and left for the office, not even noticing Susan. After she left, I invited the department head for a tea break. The next day, an unbelievable incident occurred. It all started with a terrible misunderstanding by Dorothy. I was utterly speechless when I heard the story. The incident occurred that afternoon. While I was working, my mobile phone suddenly rang with a call from Dorothy. Yes, what happened? I thought Dorothy was busy with the final setup of an outdoor event. Pondering if there was an issue with that, Susan surprisingly said with a hint of laughter in her voice, I caused an accident and it's a total wreck now. Hearing this, I asked what she meant, and she explained that she had taken my car keys from my bag without permission and used my car to go to the event site. On her way back, she got distracted and crashed into the car in front. Thankfully, no one was seriously injured as the speed wasn't high, but the mirror broke and the front part was significantly dented. The engine wouldn't start, suggesting it might be a total loss. I responded in a daze to Dorothy's story. She seemed displeased with my reaction. Moreover, she even suggested claiming the other party's insurance and asking for car repair costs. Confused, I asked her again. Sorry about the luxury car, but since it's your car, it's no problem, right? But I don't own a car. What? I don't own a car. So I couldn't comprehend what Dorothy was talking about. After I explained this, Dorothy became confused and raised her voice. Don't lie. I took the car keys from your bag. Upon hearing those words, something finally clicked in my mind. I searched my bag in a panic, realizing indeed the car keys were missing. I couldn't believe Dorothy had taken them without permission. And it wasn't even my car. Lost for words, I felt silent. Sensing my confusion, Dorothy laughed in a cheerful tone. Forgetting your own car? Is there anyone like that? You're really foolish. She continued to mock me with her words. I was so flustered that I barely heard her voice. As I stood there, pale and panicked, Susan approached my desk. Sensing something was wrong, Susan quickly approached me. Calm down, she said, trying to soothe me. What happened? She asked. I explained the situation with Dorothy to her. Susan's expression tensed, and she asked for my mobile phone. I obediently handed it over, apologizing repeatedly. Susan reassured me that I was not at fault, and suggested we needed to discuss Dorothy's actions to understand her intentions. Her calm words helped me regain composure. I've heard the situation. Susan spoke in a calm voice into my phone. Hearing Susan's voice, Dorothy seemed to be taken aback, responding loudly enough for me to hear. Susan, why are you there? I'll be clear. That car is mine. Dorothy's cries of despair continued as Susan switched to speaker mode to spare her ears. What's going on? Why was Angela using your car? Dorothy, clearly flustered, thought Susan was covering for me and demanded an explanation from me. You were driving it yesterday. I explained how it all happened, starting from the day before. The reason I had the manager's car dates back to yesterday. That day, I ended up going shopping for Dorothy with Susan accompanying me. I didn't have a car since my husband was using ours for work, and Susan kindly offered her vehicle. It was her husband's, rarely used. I went to Susan's house to pick up the car. I had gone to Susan's house to pick up the car because she didn't drive and usually relies on her husband. Her house, a large mansion, was a bit away from the station, and I had taken a taxi to get there. Seeing this, Susan suggested I drive back to save taxi fare. She knew I lived in a house with a garden and probably offered her car considering that. I hesitated, but Susan insisted it would be fine if I brought the car to the company parking lot the next day, and she would call her husband to pick it up. Despite my reluctance, don't worry about it, Susan reassured me. I might go to a restaurant with my husband that evening. He rarely dines out with me unless there's an excuse. Her light-hearted words and laughter allowed me to accept her offer. With her help, I managed to complete all the shopping. It was a luxury car and I was initially nervous driving it, but I got used to it over the day. That evening, I drove the car home as Susan had suggested. My husband was excited and surprised to see such a luxury vehicle. The next morning, I drove to work in Susan's car and parked it in the spot she had designated, planning to return the keys later. Hearing my explanation, Dorothy gasped, realizing her huge mistake. What should I do? Come back to the office first, then we'll talk. Susan's stern tone seemed to scare Dorothy, who let out a short scream. Upon returning to the office, Dorothy looked exhausted. She had been immediately summoned by the higher-ups as Susan had reported the accident. Susan then told Dorothy, after you finish talking with them, come to the meeting room. She called out, in the afternoon. I joined Susan in the meeting room, waiting for Dorothy. When she arrived, her face was pale, and she was visibly shaken. Please, take a seat over there. Dorothy obediently sat down across from us. What did the upper management say? Susan asked, looking for confirmation. Dorothy repeated the details of her discussion with them. It seemed she had been demoted. Dorothy's harsh treatment of subordinates and involvement of them in personal matters had also been criticized. I'm being moved to a subsidiary. Seeing Dorothy disheartened, Susan calmly informed her that it was a natural consequence. Dorothy, feeling cornered, suddenly turned her angry gaze towards me. However, as soon as her gaze shifted to me, standing next to Susan, her eyes widened in surprise. This is all your fault! In a fit of rage, Dorothy lunged at me. I was caught off guard and couldn't resist as she pulled me towards her. Susan tried to intervene but struggled against Dorothy's strength. I told Susan to call security, trying to resist Dorothy as best I could, but I knew this wouldn't last long. An excited Dorothy started yelling and berating me loudly. I didn't like you from the moment I knew you were rich. If I hadn't known, I wouldn't have mistaken that luxury car for yours. That was your mistake. It's outrageous to take someone else's things. How dare you say that to me? You always look like everything's perfect. It's infuriating. Even Susan likes you. Did you plan all this to get me out of the department? Absolutely not. This is your responsibility. Please calm down. Despite my pleas, an enraged Dorothy began hurling irrelevant insults. Thankfully, Susan arrived with security and they restrained her. I adjusted my clothes and stepped away from Dorothy, who continued to glare and hurl resentments at me. Frustrated with everything that had happened, I couldn't help but confront her. Hearing her absurd rant, I was utterly dismayed. After exploiting me, you steal and try to make me pay for the repairs? And now you want me to take responsibility? Are you sane? You're my subordinate. Your job is to obey me. I can't stand that you're richer than me. How can a subordinate not listen to me? That's what's wrong with girls raised in wealthy families. Subordinates aren't here just to clean up your messes. If all you can do is shift blame, don't act so high and mighty. Hearing her absurd rant, I was utterly dismayed. How could such a person be in charge? Even if she was competent at work, the choice of her for a leadership role was a mistake. Susan sighed, seemingly having anticipated this outcome. She had been visiting our department regularly because she was concerned about Dorothy's behavior. Dorothy's promotion had been influenced by Susan's boss, to whom she had apparently been excessively flattering. Hearing this, I felt I understood a bit of Susan's struggle. As Dorothy was led away by security, I shot her a cold look and she glared back. It seems you lack common sense more than I do. After my cold remark, Dorothy had no response and looked down silently. Susan then sternly reprimanded her. Enough already! Dorothy finally calmed down as she was led away by security. Susan and I watched her go with dismay. Following the incident, Dorothy's actions became widely known within the company. Consequently, she was dismissed. She was also billed for a new car by Susan, and Susan's husband accused her of theft, leading to legal action. Though she avoided arrest, she faced significant fines. The total expenses, including the fines, the new car, and the other driver's car repairs and insurance claims for neck pain, were substantial. Furthermore, I was being charged for the repairs of the car involved in the accident and, as it turned out later, for insurance due to the neck pain that was discovered afterward. Dorothy, now jobless, quickly depleted her savings. She tried to find work but ended up taking a part-time job at a local supermarket while searching for better opportunities. Her dissatisfaction with the low pay compared to her previous salary hindered her job hunt. I learned of her situation from Susan and felt it was a consequence of her own actions. With Dorothy gone, Susan took over our department as an interim leader. I worked harder than ever, grateful for the change. Years later, thanks to Susan's recommendation and my colleagues' support, I advanced in my career. Despite being relatively new to the company, their warm words and belief in me were overwhelming. I promised myself to work even harder. I shared the news with my husband, who suggested celebrating with a dinner date. This coming weekend, I'm looking forward to enjoying a date with my husband, which we haven't done in a long time.
What are you doing? That's why that woman's daughter is no good. She's slow to learn, slow to move, and clumsy. I can't stand to watch her. It seems that my mother-in-law, Sally, has a grudge against my mother, and she has been targeting me as well, which is truly unpleasant to the point where I want to cut ties with her. However, I've been tolerating it because I get along well with my father-in-law, Joe, and my brother-in-law, Nick. But I've been putting up with it because she gets along well with Joe and Nick. That was until Sally started playing her schemes. My name is Mary, a 32-year-old housewife. Life was full of various hardships until I married my husband, Tom. We met in middle school. I was living in poverty because my parents' company went bankrupt. On the other hand, Tom was the youngest son of a well-established upscale restaurant owner. His family never faced bankruptcy, and he was known as the richest kid in our class. It should have been the other way around. At that time, I thought so and was cold to Tom. But as we were in the same committee and got closer, "I'm the youngest son, so my parents don't expect much from me," he said sadly. Seeing Tom like that made me realize that having money doesn't necessarily mean happiness. From then on, I was drawn to Tom, and on the day of our middle school graduation, I confessed to him, and we started dating, continuing even after becoming working adults. However, one day while on a date with Tom, we unexpectedly bumped into Sally. I had hardly seen Sally, maybe only at entrance and graduation ceremonies, so it was almost like meeting her for the first time. "Nice to meet you. I'm Mary, dating Tom," I greeted her, but Sally didn't return the greeting and looked at me sternly. "I know. I've had your background checked. It's fine to date Tom for fun, but don't think you can become a part of our family." "Mom, why would you say that?" Tom retorted strongly, but Sally ignored him and left. I was trembling with shock and fear, unable to look at Sally's face and just looked down. However, Tom comforted me, and unexpectedly, this incident strengthened our resolve to definitely get married. Since then, I've gone with Tom to his family's house for family meetings. But no matter how much we asked, Sally refused to let me enter the property, so we kept visiting until we were allowed. However, mentally, it becomes tough when the situation of being turned away from the in-laws' house once a week continues for a year. Then, one day, Sally, who always comes out to refuse us, was bedridden due to illness, and Nick, the eldest son, came out in her place. "Mom's asleep, so come on in." Nick casually led us into the house, ignoring Sally's opinion. The house, belonging to a family that runs a high-end restaurant, had a stylish and pleasant interior. Joe was in the restaurant's kitchen, and "I'll tell him to come home after noon," Nick said, and until then the three of us chatted. Tom seems to be close with Nick. When Nick talked about their childhood, Tom would get embarrassed, and it seemed like a fun, brotherly relationship. Then Sally walked into the living room. "What? I told you to turn away any woman Tom brings." Sally spoke strongly, but she was coughing, seemingly unwell. "There's no need to turn her away. Isn't it rude for Mom not to meet someone who's been coming for a year?" "Maybe that's true, but—" Sally, unable to say more, sighed and left the living room. Nick then politely apologized to me. "Mary, I'm sorry about Mom." While this was happening, Joe came back and entered the living room, taking off his hat to greet us. "Welcome. So you're Tom's fiancé. What a lovely girl. We all welcome you here." I had thought Joe, being a chef, might be a difficult person, but he wasn't. Not knowing this, I nervously returned a forced smile, thinking he might be hiding his true self. It turns out only Sally is against the marriage, while Joe is rather welcoming. Though we run a high-end restaurant, we're not a strict family. I don't necessarily want the kids to take over the business. Doing what they want and marrying who they love to lead a life without regrets is what's most important. Joe shared his opinion. Then Nick added, "It would be okay with just relatives, but Mom insists the marriage partner must be from a high-status family. David might not know, but Mary and Tom have been turned away by Mom every week for the past year." Hearing this, Joe's expression changed. "A year? If that's true, it's unforgivable. Bring Sally here." Nick went to call Sally, and she staggered into the living room, clearly unwell. "What now? I'm not feeling well today." "So be it. Let's keep it short. You've been turning away Mary, who's taken the trouble to visit our house for a year?" "Well, it's because her parents ran a company, went bankrupt, and even got into bankruptcy. She doesn't fit in with our family." "So what? What does her parents' bankruptcy have to do with her? Isn't it wrong to oppose for such a reason?" Then Sally, momentarily at a loss for words, brought up something I never expected. "The thing is, Mary's mom was my classmate during my school days. I didn't like her. That's why I didn't want to become relatives with her and was waiting for the two of you to give up." Everyone present, not just me, was surprised by this revelation. "That's no reason to oppose a marriage. Let's proceed with the family meeting." Joe said that, and finally, Tom and I took a step towards marriage. The family meeting, held at Joe's upscale restaurant, progressed in a cordial atmosphere. My mother seemed to remember Sally. "Oh, Sally, isn't it? Long time no see." She greeted Sally, but Sally, perhaps still not accepting. "Long time no see." It was cold in her response. Later, my mother told me that Sally used to be the top student in their class, while my mother had the worst grades. Sally often looked down on my mother, saying, "Poor you, not even understanding such a question. I'm so glad I wasn't born as you," and would spread bad things about my mother to other classmates. So my mother was a bit worried about my marrying Tom. "I believe a woman's happiness lies in marrying the person she loves. I'm a bit worried about Tom's mom, but let Tom protect you." Her strong words made me vow to be happy with Tom. But my married life was constantly disrupted by Sally. Originally, both Tom and I were company employees, but Sally forced me to quit my job, saying it was because I was getting married. Tom argued against Sally, but her insistence was so strong that, well, I didn't really love my job anyway. I gave in. Then Sally started coming over every day, teaching me how to do household chores in detail. If I didn't do it as Sally wanted, she would say, "What are you doing? That's why that woman's daughter is no good. She's slow to learn, slow to move, and clumsy. I can't stand to watch her." And put me down by bringing up my mother. "Could you please not talk about my mom?" I retorted. But then she would say, "Oh, you're talking back now? I don't want someone like you with Tom. Will you divorce him?" And present me with divorce papers. Only Tom's section was filled out, and I cried when I first saw it, believing it was real. Sally would leave in the evening, and when Tom came home, "Are you really wanting a divorce, signing divorce papers just because Sally told you to?" I confronted him, crying. "I don't know anything about divorce papers. I've never written anything like that." Tom insisted strongly. So the next time Sally brought out the divorce papers as a threat, I decided to check them more carefully. The handwriting looked similar, but slightly different from his usual writing. "Sally, could I have those divorce papers? I want to go to the police to verify they're fake. You know, forging official documents is quite a serious crime." After I said that, Sally stopped bringing the divorce papers, but she continued to mock me for being poor and having bankrupt parents, making our mother-in-law and daughter-in-law relationship very strained. Even now, 3 years into our marriage, it seems Sally still doesn't like me. One day, when Sally came to our house, she surprisingly seemed calm, so I immediately became cautious. Then, "Mary, I'm sorry for everything I've done to you, Sally said. What? I've been reflecting on how horribly I've treated you. So as a gesture of reconciliation, would you like to join a dinner party I'm hosting? It's going to be a women-only gathering at a restaurant, kind of like a ladies' night. It won't be just any women, but wives of company presidents and women who run their own businesses will be there. I also want to make amends with your mom, so please come together. She invited me to the event. Sally seemed genuinely repentant. There's no reason not to forgive someone who is truly sorry. Certainly, there are countless grievances from Sally delaying our marriage by a year, disrupting the married life I envisioned, and making unpleasant comments about my parents. But since Sally was apologizing, I decided to forgive her just this once. I'll let my mom know. That day, Sally left promptly without lingering, and I believed she truly had repented. When I told my mother about it, she said, "We had our issues in the past, but now we're both parents of children, so we might get along. But if that's the case, I'd like to meet just you, me, and her. It feels odd to be with people I don't know." Initially reluctant, I relayed this to Sally and explained the reason. However, Sally seemed unsatisfied and called my mother directly, persuading her until she agreed to go. After the call with Sally, my mother phoned me. Somehow I ended up agreeing to go. I'll go this time, but this will be the last. I found it a bit odd. Would someone who is repentant and wants to apologize really insist on someone's presence despite their reluctance? If Sally had ulterior motives, it would make sense for her to insist, but I couldn't easily doubt her. I decided to trust Sally, who seemed to have genuinely repented and apologized that day. On the day of the event, I finished a light breakfast and arrived at the restaurant around noon, excited. The meeting time was 1 p.m., but no one was there, so I waited a bit longer. After waiting for 30 minutes and still no one showing up, I called Sally. "Sally, where are you? We're already at the restaurant." "I'm sorry, some of the attendees needed a ride, and I got a bit lost." "You're driving? Sorry about that." "It's fine. I'm on speaker. My phone is on the passenger seat. I'll be there soon. Just wait a bit longer," Sally said and ended the call. After another 30 minutes with no sign of anyone, I called Sally again. "Sally, are you still lost?" "I finally found the way, but there seems to be an accident and I'm stuck in traffic. I think I'll be there in about 30 minutes. "Is it okay if we go inside first?" "No! Actually, I wanted to keep it a secret, but there's a surprise set up in the reserved private room, and I don't want it to be seen. Also, I've informed the restaurant, so don't worry about the time." Understanding her point, my mother and I continued to wait outside the restaurant. An hour later, 2 hours after we began waiting, Nick arrived at the restaurant. I heard someone was waiting outside, but I didn't expect it to be Mary and her mom. What's going on? Nick appeared to be working, wearing a white chef's jacket and hat. "We're waiting for Sally. She said she got lost and then caught in traffic." "Do you believe that? That's Mom's lie. She's been dining in a private room with friends, already on dessert." "What? Did they start despite missing 2 people?" "No, the count was exactly right." Then my mother, usually gentle and calm, showed a terrifying expression I had never seen before. "Would you mind taking us to that private room?" Nick, turning pale, led us to Sally's room. As Nick quietly tried to open the door, my mother burst in with a loud bang. Everyone looked surprised, and Sally was initially shocked, but then, Oh, you found out? Thank you for waiting 2 hours. I told you to come 30 minutes later than the actual time. Wouldn't it be funny if a miserable mother and daughter were standing outside when we left? But now that it's come to this, there's no helping it. This place is a social venue for the winners. Could the poor people please leave? She looked down on us, smirking and laughing. However, Sally was the only one laughing. None of her about 8 friends were. Then my mother, with a bright smile, responded, "Is that so? How interesting. I recognize everyone here. Would you mind conveying a message to them? Cancel our deals." Deals? Yes, I know all these people. Some are company owners, others are wives of presidents. As my mother said this, Sally burst into laughter. Amazing, isn't it? You were a president's wife over 10 years ago, right? Are these from that time? But who wants to associate with someone whose company went under? What are you talking about? Yes, my husband once bankrupted his company and is now an employee. But I started my own company 5 years ago and made it big. I'm in business with these ladies here. It was a surprise to see them. You can't do that. You were always bad at school and clumsy. You'll bankrupt it again, won't you? Nobody knows when they might go bankrupt, but for now it's growing well. Why are you stuck in the past? Don't compare me to my student days. My mother shouted this, and one of the attendees stepped forward. I didn't know about this. My apologies for any disrespect. But my colleagues and I here were unaware of this. We would like to continue a good relationship with your company. She smiled and shook hands with my mother, then turned to Sally. Given this, we'll take our leave today. Asserting their disassociation, the women all left the room. Some even left their desserts unfinished, which I felt a bit sorry for. I thought this incident might make Sally reflect a bit, but suddenly she grabbed my arm. Mary, how dare you embarrass me like this as a daughter-in-law? Angry, I immediately shook off her hand. Please stop. And I showed a reaction of rejection. I believed you when you said you were sincerely sorry and had reflected. But this treatment is the worst, don't you think? I can never believe any apology from you again. I won't be fooled by such tricks, nor will I accept any invitations from you ever again. I had never spoken back to Sally this firmly before, so she seemed quite surprised. I didn't mean it like that. I just wanted you to respect me. I wanted to show you what happens when you mock me. I didn't think you'd get so angry. Please forgive me. Sally apologized again, but I was no longer willing to forgive. I wonder what method you'll use to deceive me next time. It's scary to think about. After that, Sally had nothing to say in return. Would you like to have a meal? I'll prepare a private room. Please wait here. Nick kindly offered and asked us to sit and wait. Both my mother and I, being very hungry, accepted his kind offer. Then my mother and I enjoyed a lavish course meal, having a wonderful time. Later, the incident was relayed to Joe and Tom by Nick, and Sally seemed to have been severely reprimanded by everyone, especially Tom, who declared to Sally, I can't stand it anymore. I can't think of someone who hurts my beloved and her mom as my mother. Don't ever associate with me again. I was deeply grateful to Tom for standing up for us. Even Tom's brother, who lives far away, despised Sally for this incident, indicating just how much her actions were against human decency. Joe was particularly appalled and ended up handing Sally divorce papers and kicking her out of the house. Although Sally won't face financial difficulties even if divorced, due to property division, she's now living a lonely life, despised by her sons and abandoned by her relatives. Right after Sally stopped bothering me, I discovered I was pregnant. It seems the stress from Sally had been affecting me. This made me think that Sally had dug her own grave, and in a way I was thankful for that. Tom was overjoyed about the pregnancy and said, "I'm sorry for all the stress you've endured. From now on, I'll do my best to protect our child and our whole family." His words filled me with happiness. I too resolved to protect and cherish the happiness of our precious family.